Hi, I'm Lila. After my divorce, I thought coming home would mean safety, maybe even a little compassion. Instead, my mother met me at the door, screaming, "This house doesn't feed the useless! Get a job or get out!" That night, I stared at the ceiling on an air mattress, wondering how my life had come to this. I didn't know then that taking a job caring for a paralyzed billionaire would uncover secrets darker than I could imagine. And weeks later, it wouldn't be me on my knees, but her, begging me for help. Before we dive in, let us know. What time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. By the time I pulled into the cracked driveway, the sun was barely hanging over the row of bare trees out front. I sat in the car for a good minute, fingers gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house that used to feel like a safe place. The two-story home hadn't changed much since I was a teenager. Same peeling shutters, same dent in the garage door from when Dad backed the Buick too fast. But it felt different now. Like every memory I had in there had been scrubbed clean and replaced with a warning sign. You don't belong here anymore. I grabbed my one suitcase from the back seat, the divorce papers still shoved deep in the side pocket like they were burning a hole through the fabric. My life reduced to a suitcase and a stack of legal documents. I walked up the steps slowly, my hand hovering near the doorbell, my stomach twisting with some desperate hope for a warm welcome. Maybe Mom would hug me. Maybe Vera would come out and say, "We're glad you're home." I wasn't prepared for the voice that came before I even set foot inside. "This house doesn't feed the useless. Get a job or get out." The words came from the hallway like a slap. My mother's voice hadn't softened with age. It cut sharper than I remembered, slicing through whatever scraps of dignity I had left. I froze, still halfway outside, as if the air itself had pushed me back. For a moment I couldn't move or speak. I'd driven 3 hours straight with nothing but gas station coffee and the thought of sleeping in my old bed, and this was my welcome home. "Mom, My voice cracked, and I hated how small it sounded. "I just need a place to stay for a little while. I'll figure things out." She appeared in the doorway, arms folded across her chest, lips pressed in that thin, permanent disapproval. Corinne Cross, 65 years of hard living, opinions sharp enough to draw blood. "You've been saying you'll figure things out for years, and look where that's gotten you. Divorced, broke, back here like a stray cat." Her eyes flicked down at my suitcase, then back up at me with disgust. "I don't take in strays." Behind her, Vera leaned against the wall, sipping from a mug like she was watching a show she'd already seen before. My big sister had perfected the art of quiet judgment. "Maybe if you'd planned better," she said softly, "you wouldn't be here begging." I wanted to scream at her, at both of them, but my throat closed up. Instead, I stepped inside, dragging my suitcase over the threshold. The smell of the house hit me first, that mix of old furniture and lemon cleaner, familiar but hostile. I swallowed my pride, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just need some time. I'll get a job. I'll start paying rent if you want." Mom's laugh was short and sharp. "You? Paying rent? You can barely keep a man, Lila. You think you can keep a job?" She turned toward the living room, and I followed her gaze. That's when I saw it. The family photo on the wall. The same one from last Christmas. Except I wasn't in it. My spot on the couch, where I'd sat next to Vera, had been neatly cropped out. They'd literally cut me out of the family picture. My stomach sank so low I thought I might pass out. "Wow," I whispered before I could stop myself. "You actually cut me out." Mom didn't even look ashamed. "Why would we keep a reminder of someone who's never here? You're always off making messes, expecting us to clean them up." I felt my nails digging into my palm. Part of me wanted to yell, to tell her she was cruel and ungrateful, but I bit it back. Yelling at Corinne never fixed anything. Instead, I set my suitcase down by the stairs and forced myself to meet her eyes. "Fine. I'll find work. Tomorrow. My voice was calm, but inside I was screaming. I promised myself right then this would be the last time I'd come here for help, the last time I'd let them make me feel this small. Mom's eyes narrowed, like she was waiting for me to crack. When I didn't, she muttered, "We'll see," and walked away. Vera gave me one of her smug, pitying smiles before disappearing upstairs. Hours later, I lay on an air mattress in my old room, staring at the ceiling. The walls were still painted that pale blue I'd chosen at 16, back when I thought I'd leave this place and never look back. My phone screen glowed in the dark as I scrolled through job listings, my eyes burning from exhaustion. I didn't want another dead-end job. I needed something that would get me out of here, fast. Then I saw it. A live-in caregiver for a paralyzed billionaire. I froze, reading the post twice. It felt impossible, too big for someone like me. But my gut told me to click. I had no idea that one click would change everything. 2 days later, I was standing at the gates of a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread about people whose lives didn't touch reality. I had reread the job description at least a dozen times on the drive here, trying to convince myself I wasn't in over my head. Live-in caregiver, private accommodations, competitive pay. It sounded like a lifeline, and yet, as the gates opened and I drove up the winding path lined with sculpted hedges, all I could think was, I don't belong here. The mansion rose in front of me, all sleek lines and glass panels that reflected the gray Ohio sky. Even in the late autumn chill, the grounds looked immaculate, perfectly trimmed lawns, fountains that still ran despite the cold, and an eerie quiet that made me feel like I'd stepped into another world. I parked near the side entrance where staff presumably came and went. My old sedan felt absurdly out of place against the luxury cars lined along the driveway. I grabbed my single suitcase and knocked, smoothing down my thrift store blazer as though it would make me look more capable. When the door opened, the man standing there didn't bother to smile. Tall, sharp suit, mid-40s, his presence screamed gatekeeper. "You're Lila Cross?" His voice was clipped, rehearsed. "Yes," I said, gripping the handle of my suitcase tighter. "I'm here for—" "I know why you're here." He didn't invite me in so much as step aside just enough for me to squeeze past. "Marcus Hale, house manager. There are rules, and I suggest you follow them if you want to keep this job." I blinked, caught off guard by how unwelcoming he sounded. "Of course," I said quickly. "First rule, no unnecessary questions. Second, you don't enter restricted areas. You'll know them when you see them. Third, Eleanor's schedule is non-negotiable. Meals, medications, bedtime, all to the minute. If you can't handle that, leave now." He spoke like he was laying down laws, his tone making it clear I wasn't special, just another employee who could be replaced. I nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Understood." He led me down a hallway that could have been in an art gallery. White walls, black and white photographs, a smell of polished wood and faint lavender. I noticed cameras in the corners, subtle but visible. Someone was always watching. We passed a set of double doors that were locked with a keypad. I slowed to glance, but Marcus didn't break stride. "Off limits," he said without turning his head. I quickened my pace to keep up. He eventually stopped at a door at the end of the hall. "This is your room," he said. I stepped inside to find a small but pristine staff quarters. Twin bed, modest dresser, a folded nurse's uniform laid out on top. My size, perfectly pressed, as if they'd known I was coming long before I confirmed. My stomach tightened. "Dinner at 6. "Don't be late," Marcus said before walking out without another word. I sat on the bed for a moment, my hands brushing over the uniform. They'd prepared for me. How? And why did that make me feel like I wasn't here by accident? I shook off the thought. This was a job. A good one. I needed it. At exactly 6, I found my way to the dining room. The space was massive, with a long table that could seat 20, though only 2 places were set. Marcus stood behind one of them. In the head chair sat Eleanor Quinn, my new employer. 72, elegant in a silk blouse, silver hair swept back neatly, eyes sharper than any I'd seen in years. Her wheelchair was positioned perfectly, her posture straight, regal, despite her condition. She studied me for a moment that felt too long before speaking. "Do you scare easily?" Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. I swallowed. "No," I lied. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Good. You'll need that." Dinner was quiet except for Eleanor's occasional questions, each one deliberate. Where did I grow up? Why did I leave my last job? What did I hope to get from this one? She wasn't making conversation. She was dissecting me. I answered carefully, feeling like I was under a microscope. Afterward, Marcus gave me another tour of the first floor. Every step, he repeated his warnings. "Don't go where you're not invited. Don't ask what doesn't concern you." He said it with an edge that made me wonder if he enjoyed intimidating people. As we walked, I noticed another set of locked doors and caught the faint sound of voices, low, urgent. Later, in passing, I caught Marcus and Eleanor speaking in hushed tones. "The timing has to be right. She doesn't know yet. Keep it that way." My chest tightened, but I kept walking. That night, as I helped Eleanor into bed, her grip suddenly tightened around my hand. For someone paralyzed, her strength startled me. "Don't believe what they tell you," she whispered, her voice hoarse but deliberate. "Not even Marcus." I froze, my heart hammering. "What do you mean?" I asked, but her eyes closed, shutting me out as if the conversation was over. Hours later, I lay awake in my quarters, staring at the ceiling. The house was too quiet. Then I heard it, the faint creak of wheels moving along the hallway. My breath caught. I waited, listening. It came closer, then stopped outside my door. I sat up, heart pounding, but when I slowly opened the door, the hallway was empty. By morning, I knew I wasn't just here to care for a patient. I had stepped into something far darker. By morning, I understood this wasn't just a job. The creak of those wheels in the hallway still echoed in my head, and my pulse jumped at every sound. I barely slept, but when the first pale light filtered through the narrow blinds in my room, I forced myself out of bed. This wasn't the time to fall apart. I needed to hold myself together, at least on the outside. The first thing I noticed was my door, slightly ajar. My stomach knotted. I had locked it. I remembered turning the key and double-checking. I stared at the gap for a long moment, then peeked into the hallway. Empty, everything still and quiet, as if nothing had happened. When I mentioned it to Marcus over coffee in the kitchen, he didn't even look up from his tablet. "This house settles in strange ways. Probably the wind," he said, dismissive, making me feel foolish for even bringing it up. I wanted to argue, but what would be the point? He had a way of shutting things down before they even began. After breakfast, I wheeled Eleanor to the sunlit corner of her bedroom for her morning meal. The way she sat, composed and elegant despite her condition, made me feel like I was serving royalty. She was quiet at first, letting me feed her bites of oatmeal and fruit. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "This house has buried more than one secret." I paused, the spoon hovering mid-air. "What do you mean?" Her eyes locked on mine, sharper than they had been last night. "If you stay long enough," she murmured, "you'll become one of them." A chill ran down my spine. "One of what?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. She didn't answer. She just looked past me, as if she were staring through the years, to something I couldn't see. After I cleaned up her tray, I noticed a book on the table beside her bed, a worn, leather-bound journal wedged between more decorative novels. A photograph peeked out from between the pages. I hesitated but couldn't help myself. I slipped it out. And it was Eleanor, much younger, standing between a smiling man and a little girl. They looked happy, whole. "Who are they?" I asked softly. Her face hardened in an instant. "They're gone. Don't ask again." Her voice was sharp enough to cut. I slid the photo back and apologized, though the image stayed burned in my mind. A part of me wanted to push further, but another part, the one that had learned how to survive my mother's barbed words and Vera's smirks, knew when to let things go. As I moved through the house later, cleaning as part of my duties, I couldn't shake what she'd said. Buried secrets, becoming one of them. It sat heavy in my chest, like a warning. My thoughts drifted to my own life, the wreckage of my marriage, the way Corinne had spat out the word useless like it was my name. For years, I had fought to prove I wasn't what they said I was. Maybe that's why I took this job. Maybe that's why I couldn't just walk away, even when my gut told me to run. It was during that cleaning round that I noticed something different. The heavy double doors to the west wing were slightly ajar. Yesterday, they'd been firmly locked. Now, a faint sound leaked through. Music? Whispering? I couldn't tell. I stepped closer, heart thudding. Before I could push the door open, Marcus appeared out of nowhere, his hand slamming it shut with a force that made me stumble back. "You don't belong there," he barked. Don't go there." Each word was clipped, deliberate. He held my gaze until I nodded, then stalked off, leaving me standing there with my pulse hammering in my ears. By evening, I was exhausted, physically and mentally. After helping Eleanor to bed, I started to leave when she reached out, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "You're stronger than they think," she said softly. "Stay." There was something in her tone, not a command, but a plea. I nodded, though I didn't fully understand why I was agreeing. Later that night, as I sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "You don't know what you signed up for. Leave, before it's too late." My throat went dry. I stared at the words, my mind racing. Who sent this? And what exactly had I stepped into? But by the next morning, I realized leaving wasn't an option anymore, not after what I discovered. By the next morning, I'd accepted one thing: running wasn't an option. Not yet. My phone was still on the nightstand, the anonymous message burned into my memory. I read it again before leaving my room. Leave, before it's too late. I didn't know who had sent it, but I knew one thing. Someone in this house wanted me gone. The hallway was bright, sun filtering through those massive windows, but instead of soothing me, the light felt like it exposed every crack in this mansion's perfect veneer. I walked toward the kitchen, trying to calm the storm in my head. When I stepped inside, Marcus was there, already slicing fruit with that precise, mechanical rhythm he always had. He looked up. "What are you reading?" I froze, realizing my phone was still in my hand. Nothing, just emails. My voice sounded too casual, and his stare lingered too long for me to believe he bought it. "Be careful what you read in this house," he said flatly, as if it were advice or a warning. I tucked my phone into my pocket and forced a smile. Noted. As I turned to leave, his voice followed me, cool and sharp. "Stay out of places you're not supposed to be. You don't want to make this place unpleasant for yourself." The way he said unpleasant sent a chill up my spine. Later, while I was feeding Eleanor her breakfast, I couldn't help but watch Marcus's reflection in the window as he moved about the room, his presence looming even when he wasn't speaking. Eleanor noticed my tension. "Don't let Marcus fool you," she said suddenly, her voice clearer than I'd ever heard it. I leaned in and she gripped my wrist. "He's protecting something. It's not me." I blinked at her, trying to make sense of that. "Then, what is it?" She didn't answer. Her eyes just bored into mine as if she'd already told me enough. I finished feeding her in silence, my thoughts racing. What could Marcus possibly be protecting in this house? The West Wing? The closed doors? By late morning, I found myself back in the grand hallway, standing near that door. The West Wing, the one place I wasn't supposed to be. I knew better, but Eleanor's words wouldn't leave me. I reached out, fingertips brushing the cool brass handle. "Do you not listen?" I jumped. Marcus was there, his shadow stretching across the floor like a predator's. He grabbed my arm, not hard enough to bruise, but with a firm grip that made my heart pound. "Let go!" I snapped, twisting my arm out of his grasp. His expression darkened. "You're lucky to have this job. Don't make it harder on yourself." My fear spiked, but so did my anger. "I'm here for her," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Not you. Touch me again, and you'll regret it." The words surprised even me. For a moment, we just stared at each other, neither of us backing down. Then he smirked, like I'd just made things more interesting for him, and walked away without another word. I stood there, my breath shallow, my hand still tingling from his grip. By the time evening came, I'd managed to steady myself. I wouldn't let Marcus intimidate me, not here, not anymore. I had lived through worse. My mother's voice echoed in my mind, that word she'd hurled at me like a weapon, useless, and for years I'd swallowed it. I wasn't going to do that here. That night, I walked past Eleanor's room, planning to head straight to my quarters, but I stopped. Her voice drifted through the half-open door, soft, hushed, like she was speaking to someone. I stepped inside. "Eleanor?" She was alone. No phone, no visitor. Just her, sitting in her chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She turned her head toward me and smiled, not warm, but knowing. "They'll come for you soon," she said simply. My heart thudded in my chest. "Who?" But she only smiled wider, as if my question had amused her. I left her room with that smile burned into my mind, every nerve in my body on high alert. And by the next evening, I learned exactly what she meant, in the most terrifying way possible. And by the time night fell, the mansion had turned into something different. It wasn't just quiet. It was suffocating. The hum of the security cameras in the hallway had become background noise, so constant it felt like a second heartbeat. And the silence between the creaks of the house felt intentional, like the place itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a wrong move. I stepped out into the dim hallway, intending to grab a glass of water, and that's when I saw it. One of the security cameras above the corridor, the one Marcus had told me was broken, blinked red. It wasn't broken at all. Someone was actively watching me. I froze. My mind raced back to Marcus's words that morning. "Stay out of places you're not supposed to be. You don't want to make this place unpleasant." He hadn't just been threatening me. He'd been letting me know that my every move was being monitored. My feet felt heavy as I walked toward the kitchen. I could almost feel the weight of whoever was behind those cameras, tracking me. The fridge door's low hum filled the kitchen, and I tried to focus on something simple, water, a distraction, when I heard footsteps behind me. "You're wandering again." I spun around. Marcus was leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "I couldn't sleep," I said quickly. "Just needed water." He tilted his head, as if I'd said something amusing. "You really should stick to the rooms you're assigned. This house, it has boundaries for a reason." His tone was light, but I could hear the blade behind his words. "And boundaries keep people safe." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped closer, closing the distance. "No. I'm reminding you how lucky you are. Most people would kill for a place like this. Don't make us regret giving it to you." I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat felt tight. I walked past him without another word, clutching the glass of water like a shield, and shut myself back in my room. Hours passed, and I couldn't calm down. Every sound made me jump. A branch scraping the window, the pipes groaning in the walls. Finally, I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I heard the soft squeak of wheels in the hallway. I opened my door and froze. Eleanor's wheelchair was parked right outside my room. My stomach dropped. She was in her bed when I checked on her earlier. I rushed down the hall to her room, and sure enough, she was still there, asleep or pretending to be. Someone had moved that chair, placed it outside my door like a message. I backed away, my whole body trembling. This wasn't paranoia anymore. Whoever was watching me wasn't just observing. They were playing with me. I went back to my room and locked the door, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the key. My mother's voice came back to me, as clear as if she were in the room. Useless. I hated that word, but in that moment, I felt every ounce of it. My finger hovered over my phone. I almost called her, Corinne, just to hear a voice that wasn't dripping with menace. But then I remembered what she'd say, that I brought this on myself, that I deserved it, and I couldn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I sat there in the dark, staring at the locked West Wing door across the hall, visible through the crack in my own doorway. It wasn't just a door anymore. It was a challenge. Whatever was going on in this house, Marcus, Eleanor, whoever sent that text, the answers were behind that door, and I was being warned to stay away. I must have dozed off eventually, because I woke to the sound of a voice. "You don't belong here." It was low, deliberate, just outside my door. My pulse pounded in my ears as I grabbed the handle and yanked the door open. The hallway was empty. No one there, just that blinking red light from the camera. I woke up with the memory of that voice outside my door still ringing in my ears. But this time, instead of the cold wave of fear that had been my constant companion since I arrived, something else took its place. A slow, steady heat. I sat up in bed, staring at the thin strip of light creeping in under the curtains, and said it out loud to myself. If they want me gone, they'll have to drag me out. I couldn't keep living like prey. The morning air in the mansion felt deceptively calm. The corridors were still and bright, but the cameras on the walls reminded me I wasn't alone. I grabbed my sweater and made my way to Eleanor's room. She was awake, propped up in bed, her sharp eyes following me before I even spoke. "You didn't sleep," she said. It wasn't a question. I poured her a glass of water, trying to appear composed. "Did you?" Her lips twitched, almost like she found that funny. "Sleep doesn't come easy here." Too many things happen when it's dark. I set the water on her nightstand. Like what? Her gaze flicked toward the ceiling, toward the corners of the room, the same corners I now knew held cameras. "Marcus has eyes in places you wouldn't expect," she said softly. "Hidden places. You can't see them, but they're there." It sent a shiver down my spine, but I leaned closer. "Then tell me where they are. I need to know." She shook her head slowly. "Knowing too much too quickly gets people hurt." Her tone was gentle, but it felt like a warning. Or maybe a test. I didn't press her. Not yet. After breakfast, I excused myself and returned to my corridor. Every time I walked down those halls, I felt Marcus's presence, even when he wasn't there. But if Eleanor was right, the cameras were his leash, his way of keeping me contained. That thought made my anger sharpen. That was when I decided on my first move. I studied the camera outside my room. It looked old, one of the broken ones Marcus had dismissed. I'd believed him at first. Now I knew better. I dragged a chair from my room, climbed up carefully, and disconnected the wires behind the casing. My heart pounded the entire time, expecting Marcus to round the corner and catch me in the act. But the camera went dark. For the first time since I arrived, I felt like I had carved out a pocket of privacy for myself, a space where his watchful eyes couldn't reach. Later, As I tidied Eleanor's nightstand, I noticed a corner of something sticking out from under her stack of books. I slid it out, a locked, leather-bound journal. Beside it, tucked between the pages of an old novel, was a USB drive. "What are you doing?" Her voice cut through the room like a blade. I spun around, clutching the items like I'd been caught stealing. But Eleanor wasn't angry. She was amused. "If you want to know the truth," she said, her voice low, "you'll have to earn it." My stomach tightened. "Earn it how?" She didn't answer, just turned her head toward the window, dismissing me like a queen bored of her subject. By the time I left her room, my head was buzzing with questions. That's when Marcus found me. He was waiting in the kitchen, leaning against the counter like a man who owned every square inch of this place. "You're getting comfortable," he said casually, but the sharpness under his words made me freeze. "I'm just doing my job," I replied. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "The house doesn't keep secrets for long. Don't make the mistake of thinking you're invisible." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I forced myself to hold his gaze. "I'm here for Eleanor. That's all." He smirked like he knew I was lying, then walked away without another word. The moment he left, I gripped the counter and took a deep breath. He knew I was digging, and I couldn't afford to slip up. That night, I sat on my bed and thought about everything. My mother calling me useless, Marcus trying to break me down, Eleanor dangling answers like bait. No more. If I was going to stay here, it wouldn't be as their victim. I'd find out what they were hiding, even if it killed me. That's when I saw it. An envelope slid under my door. Inside was a single key. No note, no explanation, just cold metal in my hand. I stared at it for what felt like an hour, turning it over in my fingers. I already knew what it meant, and I already knew where it might lead. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I sat with that key resting in my palm like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It wasn't just metal. It was a message, an invitation, a warning. By midnight, I'd made up my mind. I slid quietly down the hallway, keeping close to the wall where the cameras couldn't catch a full view. Eleanor's suite loomed at the far end, its heavy wooden door cracked just enough for a sliver of light to spill out. I paused outside her study for a moment, listening. Silence. I turned the key over in my fingers one last time and fitted into the small keyhole I'd noticed earlier on the carved frame of the ornate mirror in her study. A soft click echoed louder than I expected. I flinched, waited, then slowly eased the mirror open like it was a door. Behind it, darkness, a narrow passage, tight, dust-laced, the air stale and untouched. I took a breath and stepped inside. The room at the end of the passage was barely larger than a walk-in closet, but what it held made my stomach twist. 4 old monitors flickered quietly in the dark, each showing grainy feeds from around the mansion. One from the kitchen, another from Eleanor's bedroom, one on the staircase, and the 4th, my room. There it was, my bed, my nightstand, the copy of the book I'd left face down beside the lamp. Everything. Watched. Next to the monitors sat a filing cabinet, and beside it, a small safe tucked beneath a dusty desk. The desk drawers were filled with manila folders, receipts, financial logs. My fingers shook as I flipped through them. Names, wire transfers, offshore accounts. Then I found it. Marcus's name, scribbled repeatedly, attached to document after document showing movement of Eleanor's assets into companies he controlled. But that wasn't all. In the middle drawer, hidden under a stack of tax records, I found a folded letter, yellowed with age. Addressed, but never mailed. It was written by Eleanor, her shaky handwriting unmistakable. "I don't believe the fall was an accident," it read. "Marcus was the last one with me on the stairs. I can't prove it, but I need someone to know, in case I'm silenced." I stopped breathing. Behind the monitor glow, I saw myself, knees buckling, body folding into the floor. I didn't cry. Not yet. But the shaking started deep, low in my ribs. For a moment, I wasn't in this hidden room. I was back in my mother's living room, her voice cutting through me. This house doesn't feed the useless. I'd believed her. And now, here I was. Not just unwanted, but disposable again. Watched, used, boxed in. But this time, I wasn't 12, and I wasn't about to back down. I stood slowly, pressing my palm to the wall to steady myself. That's when I noticed a small photograph wedged behind the corner of the filing cabinet. I pulled it out gently. It was Eleanor, years younger, holding a child, a little girl, maybe 5, grinning up at the camera. Written on the back in faded pen, "For my daughter, so you'll know the truth one day." I stared at it for a long time. My thoughts raced. Eleanor had a child? Could that be Vera? No, the timeline didn't make sense. Someone else. But what did this have to do with me? As I tucked the photo into my sweater pocket, I heard the faintest creak behind me. I turned, and Marcus stood at the threshold, just outside the mirror door. He wasn't pretending anymore. "You've been busy," he said, stepping into the room, eyes sweeping the monitors. "Curiosity's dangerous in this house, Lila." I held my ground. So is betrayal. He didn't smile, didn't blink. "You really think you're smarter than me?" I shrugged. "I think I have nothing left to lose." We stood in that stale air, the silence thick between us, every unsaid word hanging sharp and heavy. Then he leaned in just enough for his voice to drop. "If you like digging," he said softly, "be careful. Graves have a way of swallowing the curious." Marcus's words still clung to me like smoke, but they didn't choke me this time. They burned, clean and sharp. For the first time, I felt my fear coiling into something useful. I wasn't prey anymore. The next afternoon, Marcus summoned me to dinner. No explanation, just a "be there at 7." When I walked into the grand dining hall, I stopped dead. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, set like we were attending a holiday feast. Marcus sat at the head, calm and polished in a tailored suit, like this was just another evening. And then I saw her. My mother. Ruth Ann sat near the end of the table, purse on her lap, staring at me with that same pinched expression she'd worn when she called me useless. I froze in the doorway. What is she doing here? Marcus didn't answer right away. He gestured for me to sit, smiling like a snake. "We're having a family dinner. Isn't that what you wanted, Lila? Family?" I didn't move. My mother broke the silence. "Marcus told me you've been involved in things you shouldn't." Her voice was cold, rehearsed. "Lila, if this is true—" "Don't!" I snapped before I could stop myself. Marcus chuckled softly, standing. "Oh, don't be so defensive. Let's make this easy for everyone." He slid a manila envelope across the table toward me. I didn't touch it. "Go on," he said. "Open it." I didn't need to. I knew what was inside before I even looked. But I made myself pull the photos out. Grainy black and white images of me in Eleanor's study, pulling drawers, reading files. "Caught you red-handed," Marcus said smoothly. "Our poor Eleanor opens her home to you, and this is how you repay her, snooping, plotting, trying to steal what isn't yours." I forced myself to meet his gaze. "You set up cameras in a paralyzed woman's bedroom, and I'm the problem?" Marcus smirked. "Don't twist this. You've been manipulating Eleanor, inserting yourself where you don't belong. Even your mother knows what kind of person you are." I glanced at Ruth Ann, who looked down at her lap. Of course she wouldn't defend me. Marcus leaned back in his chair, savoring it. "You see, Ruth Ann, this is what happens when you coddle someone too long. They start thinking they're entitled to everything, even a dying woman's fortune." It was meant to humiliate me, and maybe it would have. A week ago. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it toward my mother. Read this. Then tell me who's really the thief. Marcus's face twitched. These, I said, keeping my voice steady, are bank records. Transfers Marcus made into his own accounts. And this, I tapped the letter inside, is a letter Eleanor wrote, naming him as the one responsible for her accident. She feared for her life. For good reason. My mother's hands shook as she opened the folder. She scanned the first page, her lips tightening. Fabrications, Marcus said lightly, but his jaw tightened. She's desperate. She made those up to turn you against me. Really? I said. Then I suppose the state investigator will be interested to know how I made up copies of surveillance feeds and years of bank statements. The smirk slid off his face. Oh, I didn't just bring them here, I added. They're already with Eleanor's lawyer and the authorities. So even if you bury me, Marcus, your little empire goes down with you. The silence was deafening. Eleanor, who had been quiet at the far end of the table, finally spoke. She's telling the truth. Her voice was thin but steady. Marcus laughed once, too loud, the sound ugly in the cavernous room. You think this saves you? You think you've won? He leaned across the table, his face inches from mine, his voice low and venomous. You don't even know what game you're playing. I didn't flinch, because for the first time in my life, I did. I replayed his words. You don't even know what game you're playing. For days. But the truth was, I did. And it had ended the way I needed it to. Weeks passed like a blur. Marcus was gone, arrested for embezzlement and fraud. Eleanor's lawyer had been ruthless, cutting him out of every asset and securing her estate before he could bleed it dry. I still remember the satisfaction of hearing the quiet click of his shoes as the authorities led him out. For the first time since stepping into this house, I could breathe. But the mansion didn't feel like victory. It felt like an aftermath. That night, I sat in Eleanor's study, the soft glow of a single lamp making the room feel more like a confession booth than a place of strategy. The mirror that had hidden so many secrets stood silent, its passage sealed again. The house was quieter without Marcus, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the walls themselves were trying to process everything they'd witnessed. Eleanor was in her chair, her breathing shallow but steady. She'd been lucid more often these days, though she rarely spoke unless she had something worth saying. You did what I couldn't, she said suddenly, breaking the hush. I glanced at her. What's that? End him, she murmured, her gaze fixed somewhere past me, lost in memories I couldn't touch. I thought I'd die before I saw someone hold him accountable. There wasn't pride in her voice, just exhaustion. Before I could answer, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Not the controlled, rhythmic walk of staff. These were unsteady, almost frantic. Then a knock. I opened the door to find my mother, Ruth Ann. Her hair was disheveled, makeup smudged like she hadn't slept in days. For the first time in my life, she didn't look like the unshakable woman who once barked at me to get a job or get out. She looked small. Lila, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't answer. She stepped in without waiting for permission, her hands trembling. Please, I didn't know where else to go. I stayed rooted by the desk. Why are you here? Her eyes filled with tears as she stumbled forward. It's all gone. The house, the money. I can't even pay the bills. I've lost everything. I said nothing. She dropped to her knees in front of me, literally on her knees. Please, she begged, clutching my hands. You're all I have now. The image seared itself into my mind. The same woman who had stood tall in the doorway of my childhood home, spitting out those words. This house doesn't feed the useless. Get a job or get out. And now? I'm useless now, Lila, she sobbed. Please, don't throw me away. It should have felt like justice, maybe even satisfaction. But it didn't. I knelt down, gently pulling her hands from mine so I could help her up. "Get off the floor, Mom." Her sobs quieted as I steadied her. "I'll help you," I said carefully. "But I won't be your scapegoat anymore. I won't let you treat me like nothing just because you're hurting." She blinked at me through swollen eyes, and for the first time in my life, I think she actually saw me, not as the failure she'd crafted in her mind, but as a woman standing on her own. Eleanor watched silently from her chair, her expression unreadable. But when Ruth Ann finally left the room, Eleanor spoke again. "You've done more for me, and for yourself, than I ever could," she said softly. "Thank you." I didn't need her gratitude, but I accepted it. Later that night, I packed my things. The house no longer felt like a prison, but it wasn't home either. My home wasn't a place anymore. It was this: standing up for myself, defining my worth on my terms. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I glanced back once at the mansion. "This time," I whispered to myself, "I'm walking out on my terms." And I did. Have you ever had to walk away from family just to save yourself? Tell me in the comments. I read every one.